So good afternoon and welcome everyone. Thank you very much for joining the CIPD and ACAS Good Employment Summit for Northern England in collaboration with Northern Metro Mayors and political leaders from Liverpool, West Yorkshire, Greater Manchester and North of Tyne. My name's Daphne Duda-Green. I'm head of CIPD Northern England, and it's great to be hosting this event for you again this year. We ran it for the very first time last year for a smaller stakeholder group, and bringing it to a much bigger audience this year. So thank you all for joining. And it's great to be working and in collaboration with ACAS. So both CIPD and ACAS have been working together with many of the combined authorities in our region to create and support good and fair work charters. We help shape and steer what good work looks like. But more importantly, we're here to support organisations, whether you're micro, small or large. We want to help you make a positive difference to people at work. So it's great to see that within our region that this agenda is really emerging and it's really supporting improving good employment standards. And this can only help us to boost regional inequalities and level up investment and economic growth for success in our region. So last year, we ran it for the first time, as I said, and there was a lot of conversation. But the things that really stuck out were the urgent need for skills reform. How do we collectively work around fair pay for all industries? How do we continue to support our small businesses? And more importantly, focusing on improving job quality and improving mental health and well-being. And this year we continue to face into uncertainty. Along with the cost of living crisis, people managers are facing a more critical role in navigating and supporting workers to make a transition into new ways of working, but also ensuring that they're happy, that they're motivated and they're engaged. So we know that we've got great charters, we know that we've got great policies, but what we have to absolutely recognise is that people managers are often at the coalface of making good work a reality. So how do we collectively work to support our people managers? And this is why the summit this year is really focusing on people managers and the challenges that they face in tough times. Last year, CIPD and ACAS, together with the Greater Manchester Good Employment Charter, launched a guide called The Soft Skills in Hard Times, which offers valuable insight and impact and talks about low-performing management and the impact that has on workers. And we'll be sharing a guide after the event, and we'll also be working on a revised copy for you to see. So according to CIPD research, only 40% of line managers receive any kind of people management training, and management style is often related to work-related stress. So we all need to work together to help improve capability of people managers. And we know that this will only lead to successful organisations, but if we don't pay attention to it, it's low productivity and it's an unhappy workforce. So that's just sharing some of the context for today. Really pleased that you can join us because this is a unique opportunity to hear from our Northern Metro Mayors and our leaders, including CIPD and ACAS, on how we can work together to make a real positive difference to people's lives and create more quality and fair work opportunities and practices in our region. So I'm going to just go through housekeeping very quickly. This event isn't being monitored, so there won't be an opportunity to ask questions, but we are going to have Peter and Susan co-chair a Q&A session for us. Most of our Metro Mayors can stay for all of the time, but we will be closing at 1:15. Some may need to leave earlier, and we will be recording the session today as well. So now I'm going to pass on to Peter Cheese, our CEO, and Susan Clues, the CEO of ACAS, who will introduce themselves and our speakers, but also talk a little bit about the importance of the Good Work agenda from both of our organisations' perspectives. So I'm going to hand over to Peter Cheese to kick us off. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Daphne, and hello to all of you. It's fantastic to have the opportunity again to meet and talk about this really, really important agenda. How do we create good work for the future? And I'm really delighted to be joined by the Metro Mayors, as Daphne's already introduced, but also, of course, my co-chair, Susan Clues, Chief Executive of ACAS, and I'm sure ACAS would be a very familiar organisation to you. I'm the Chief Executive of the CIPD, so we're the professional body for HR and people development, and we have members up and down the country working in organisations large and small, but of course, the role of our profession in helping to ensure that we are creating good working environments, good jobs that use people's skills effectively, that are fair, that are inclusive, and that give people voice and autonomy in what they do, all of which we know are vital and critical factors and ingredients in what makes a good job and what makes quality work. And we've researched these sorts of questions over many years as a professional body. We've worked with many academics in the field that call out these different dimensions of job quality. And I think particularly now, when we're going through so much change, a lot of debate about the future of work, a lot of concern and also opportunity that people see from the impact of things like technology on the jobs that we do. We're also, as Daphne touched on, in some challenging times around things like cost of living and fairness in its widest sense, big agendas for us right now. So this is both about how we work through the current challenges, but I think also focus on the future and how do we create good and fair work for all. And that is an incredibly important business agenda, because we know that it is every business needs to be able to attract and recruit the diversity of talent and skills that they need to be effective. That they also need to be organizations that reflect the communities of which they are part. So this is a critical business agenda, but it's also a critical social agenda, because we know how important it is to create good work and good opportunities for everybody. And we see in different parts and different regions up and down the United Kingdom that this agenda has been taken forwards in I think, some very positive ways. And I would absolutely echo what Daphne said. I think it's really brilliant to see how many of the mayoralties, particularly in the north of England, are driving this agenda, and hence having the mix of representation that we have in this webinar across the north of England. And it's fantastic to see that. And I think a lot of the energy and enthusiasm that we're seeing for these agendas in the north are things that we can all learn from, and that we need to take the lead and make sure that we are spreading this into every part of the country, into organizations everywhere. And I know during the course of the conversation, we will debate things like how is this agenda progressing? What support do businesses need? How does this work in small enterprises as much as it works in large enterprises? And also, as Daphne said, what we need to do to ensure that we are equipping our line managers and our people managers to manage people effectively. And as I said, this is such an important agenda now when we talk about all these ideas of inclusion. And to add to that, of course, different working practices that we're seeing emerging now. Flexible working in all its different forms can only work if we are supporting our people effectively, and of course equipping our people managers to manage people in these different sorts of circumstances. So again, thank you to all of you for joining. Big thanks to the Metro Mayors that Susan will introduce, and I will hand over therefore to Susan to introduce herself, make a few comments, and then we'll move right into the conversation and discussion with our very esteemed panel that we've brought together today. So Susan, over to you.
Peter, thank you very much, and hello everybody. Really delighted to be here, both as Chief Executive of ACAS, but also I have to say as a very proud Northerner, it is brilliant to hear about the work that's going on across the north of England. So delighted to have the opportunity to be with you today. I mean, if you don't know ACAS, just a word about who we are. We're employment relations experts, we're largely publicly funded, and we're here to make working life better, both for businesses and employees. We kind of are there to support everybody. And we know from ACAS's perspective that good work matters so much, and that strong people management is that kind of glue that holds our organisations together. And also poor line management, weak line management can contribute to conflict, something which my organisation spends a lot of time resolving. And conflict costs the British economy nearly £30 billion a year. So kind of, you know, really investing in those strong people management skills does have a strong economic impact as well, both for individual businesses and for the economy too. And so ACAS puts as much focus actually in trying to promote good practice and share good practice and provide advice to businesses, as well as resolving conflict when it happens. So, you know, you can see our advice codes, helpline, that sort of thing. But I'm not going to say a lot more at this stage, because I know that colleagues on the call will be wanting to hear from our guests today, and we've got an absolute brilliant lineup. So thank you so much in advance to our Metro Mayors and councillors for giving your time this afternoon. So some very quick introductions, and I'll just run through the guests that we've got with us today, and then I'll go through with each of the guests, asking them to give a quick overview about the work in their area. So quick roll of honour here. We've got Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester. We've got Tracy Brabin, the Mayor of West Yorkshire, Steve Rotherham, the Metro Mayor of Liverpool, and Councillor Karen Kilgour, the Deputy Leader of Newcastle City Council. We said it was a good lineup, didn't we? That's super impressive. Thank you so much. So I'll ask each of the Metro Mayors and Councillor to tell us about the work that's going on in your area. The biggest challenge, though, I'm afraid, is that I'm going to impose a 5-minute time limit on you. So I know that's a tough call because there is brilliant work going on in each of your areas. But Andy, if I could turn to you first of all, could you just give us a bit of a flavour about the work that's going on in Greater Manchester?
I will, absolutely. Thank you, Susan. Afternoon, everybody. Can I just say, by way of a start, though, it's a huge thanks, Peter, to you and your team, everyone at the CIPD. You've been strong supporters of the Good Employment Agenda from the start, and we've really benefited from your support, but as have ACAS, Susan, and we really appreciate your support as well. I am but one part of the M62 Good Employment Corridor, or Fair Employment Corridor. Steve, Tracy and I have collaborated really closely on this. Steve and I went over to Bradford, didn't we, Tracy, early in your term, because we just wanted to build out what we're doing together, and we've tried to keep it consistent so that we don't make it hard for people to work with us, asking for one thing in Leeds and a different thing in Manchester. We've built this together. Great that Karen's here as well, and obviously with the new devolution deal coming through in the northeast. Let's make this the north of England, the whole of the north of England, as a good employment centre of excellence. It is brilliant that the north is leading this debate, but so it should. When you look at the pandemic and what that revealed, too many of our fellow residents here in the north have jobs. Sorry about the background noise. Have jobs where they can't go home if they are ill, and basically. That's what we saw in the pandemic, but that's a problem outside of a pandemic as well, because those same people will be living an existence where they're worrying themselves to sleep every night, whether or not they can, buy Easter eggs for the kids or whatever the latest thing might be. So that's why we have to fix it. The north has more insecure employment than other parts of the country, and this is why what we're building together is so exciting. And actually, I think this is where the real energy is in British politics right now, change from the bottom up. So, Karen, you asked me where we're up to. With the Good Employment Charter in Greater Manchester, it's going great guns. We have, on the latest count, let me get the number, 75 members of it, 475 supporters. We also have 600 accredited living wage employers, real living wage employers, which has almost doubled since we launched our Living Wage City Region campaign. Where's it going? So let me just try and answer that, Susan, before I hand back to you. I think where it's going for us is around adding teeth to this whole thing through public procurement, weighting all public procurement contracts for full social value. 20% is the target that we're working to, and driving change that way. So let me give you a real tangible example. Myself and the 10 leaders in Greater Manchester decided to link the Good Employment Charter that we've got to the process of re-regulation of our buses. So we've let the first contracts in tranche 1, and the 2 main contracts in Wigan and Bolton went to the only company that agreed to become a full member of the Greater Manchester Good Employment Charter. As we now go into tranche 2, we're strengthening it. We're saying that if you're not going to commit to be a member of the Good Employment Charter, if you're not going to pay the real living wage, you're out. You basically won't, you can't go forward to be considered. So, this is the journey that we're on. We're asking our NHS, our integrated care board, to adopt the full weight of NHS procurement now behind this drive. So this is where I think it begins to get really, really exciting. Just lastly, linking it as well, though, to how we build stronger kind of roots into well-paid good jobs for our residents. So we've recently signed a trailblazer devolution deal with the government. We hope that West Yorkshire and Liverpool City Region will have exactly the same powers in due course. This gives us the ability to finally deal with technical education in a way that we've never done as a country before. We want to create the country's first integrated technical education system from 16 all the way through life, so that we help all of our residents pivot, retrain and pivot towards the huge number of jobs that we've got in a fast growing digital and tech economy, and also in the green economy. And I think that's where this goes next, if you like, where we both are improving people's jobs in terms of security and pay, but we are also helping people find a pathway towards the jobs in our city region that are really driving the economy. So that's where we're up to, Susan. I will pause there and hand back to you. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Andy, and great timekeeping as ever, but no, really stimulating to hear those thoughts. Tracy, can I turn to you now in West Yorkshire and you tell us a bit about that next part of the M62?
Yes, thank you. And there's going to be a bit of repetition, I imagine, over the next couple of comments, because we really are working collectively across the north. And I just want to also echo what Andy was saying. Thank you so much, Peter, and yourself, Susan. It's really helpful that we're a part of a team trying to get this over the line. And so many leaders and managers and professionals who also want to help us as well and want to be part of the family of change. Only yesterday, I was reading an article that Bloomberg News that showed that post-COVID, Manchester has had a higher concentration of new job postings than London, with Leeds also in the top 10. So well done, Manchester. We're not in competition. I'm really pleased to see that. And actually, it's what I feel on the ground, talking to businesses, that people are coming from London, they're settling here, people internationally and nationally, and they're creating jobs. And we want them to be the right sort of quality of job, because if you're going to grow, what we want is you grow in the right way. And so here in West Yorkshire, I have a vision of that thriving economy where businesses of all shapes and sizes and sectors can meet their ambitions. And 95% of our businesses are SMEs, so we've got to really make sure that our Fair Work Charter works for them. We call it Fair Work. It's good employment elsewhere, and there's other names for it, but it's never been more important, has it? As Andy highlighted, the cost of living crisis is really biting into families and into communities. And certainly it's not just for staff. We know that people are any organization's biggest asset. So Fair Work also boosts productivity, growth, profitability, and also loyalty to a company if you're treated properly. And I'm really impressed with the progress that Steve and Andy have made on their Fair Work agenda and establishing the charters. And we're learning a lot from the work that's happening on the other side of the Pennines. Those smaller businesses are really important for me. And they've told me that it has to be really reflecting their challenges if it's going to have impact. And that's why it has taken us a wee while. We've done an enormous amount of consultation with the CBI, the TUC, the FSB to make sure that we get it right. And so for clarity, that my charter is it's got a number of sort of headlines: inclusivity, in that it's engaging all sizes and types of sector, from micro to the largest corporate, to financial services, manufacturing, the creative industries. And that it is, to Andy's point as well, it is a journey. Not everybody can get there immediately. And based on the development and learning to raise employment standards in that sustainable way. And I'm inviting organizations of all sizes to join us on that journey, and that provide all workers with opportunity, with security, with well-being, with a voice, really important in the workplace, and with a fulfilling job. And I think that most West Yorkshire employers are capable of at least making a concrete first step on all of those things. And many are doing that already, trying to enhance their workers' lives. So we're launching my charter in the next few months, and I look forward to working closely with business and wider partners. Of course, all of you on this call, unions, chambers, FSB, as I said. But the charters, however well-intentioned, they can only achieve so much. And that's why I'm committed to driving a fair and inclusive employment and good business behaviours in other ways as well, as part of a whole sort of landscape of change and support for workers. So the recent appointment of Fatima Karshan as the region's first ever inclusivity champion, she's going to help me understand better the disparity between ethnicity, pay gaps, health inequality, and so on, those economic and social health inequalities that are holding us back. We've also recently invested in the West Yorkshire energy price emergency fund, a £1 million programme aimed at getting businesses cleaner and greener, and that 1,000 well-paid skilled jobs for young people target that was one of my manifesto pledges. We're over that now. We're at 1,007, I think, and we've more to come. So I'm here to also learn from people on this call about what's happening in their regions, how we can work more collaboratively together to make the North the go-to place for investment and for jobs and for businesses to come. But if you come, then you've also got to be respectful and support the workforce, pay proper wages, give a voice, make sure that your staff have that well-being to flourish in work. And we've got to be listening to workers, to businesses, to experts, of course, to my fellow mayors doing a brilliant job on the other side of the Pennines, and also to learn from best practice and to collaborate, but also to chart our own furrow. We're pioneers here in West Yorkshire, and we'll have our own version, but I know that it's going to make a big impact. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Tracy. Brilliant. I mean, really good luck over the next couple of months, as well as you're gearing up to launch, and super to hear about the collaboration across the North. Thank you. Let's head west again along the M62, and let me go to Steve and ask you to tell us a little bit about the work in Liverpool.
Yeah, the home of Eurovision. Just thought I'd get it in because Tracy always has a pop that Manchester and Leeds didn't get Eurovision. I'm sure they would have made a huge success of it, but we are. So back onto the topic that Tracy was talking about, which is, you know, if we are attracting new jobs into the economy, and we are, then we want those companies to meet our aspirations to be good employers. You know, we believe that they should be doing this for the right moral and ethical reasons, but also if they want to benefit from some of the significant funding that we've got, then they should comply with the terms of our Fair Employment Charter. So we're trying to do carrot and stick at the same time in some cases, but we believe that we as an organisation should learn by example, lead by example, and we're doing that. Our Fair Employment Charter is now something that's being adopted by, you know, dozens and dozens of businesses right the way across the spectrum, and we have too, and we've included our local authorities in this process as well, so that it starts to be something that becomes real, and that people can see that if we're doing it, then there might be something that they want to look at as well. And just the same as I'm sure in Andy's area and Tracy's and others up in Newcastle, there are growing employment opportunities. You know, we've created about 10,000 jobs over the last few years in the Liverpool City region alone, and we've got hugely ambitious plans for becoming Britain's renewable energy coast. So if we do all of that, what does that mean? And it means that we want good companies to come here and to set up here and to treat their workforces in an appropriate manner, and that includes, you know, paying them a decent day's pay for a decent day's work, but also about signing up to the other conditions in the Fair Employment Charter. In our investment strategy, for instance, we very clearly link that with what we're doing, and we're saying in the investment strategy that organisations should be looking to, for instance, employ people locally, to use local supply chains, to look at apprenticeships, to employ people from underrepresented groups. You know, there are significant things that we can do, which then become the culture of an area, and we want to be the most inclusive place to live, to work, and to do business in. And that's what our fair employment really is part of. It's part of a suite of cadre of different policy areas, but the whole idea is to try to create that ecosystem and that culture within employers large and small, that they can benefit by doing some of the great things that we've started to see, the ones who were in the pilot scheme achieving. And again, I think it was mentioned earlier that there are benefits to the employers by doing these sorts of things. You know, productivity goes up and all of that chain that. I think ACAS were talking about earlier, you know, it stops that conflict, etc., etc. So there are huge benefits of doing this, but we've specifically targeted growth, and everybody's talking about growth, but we're investing 5% of our GVA in research and development, which is nearly double what the government wants to achieve, and they're talking about doubling theirs from the baseline that it is now. So that means that those projects which would transform the region and its economy are a very real prospect, and that's why I think it's so important to have these planks all in place, you know, a fair employment charter, a social value framework, an inclusive growth strategy, all of those parts of the jigsaw that really mean that we can maximise the potential for our area, but also get as many people as we possibly can into good, secure and fair work. I won't go on to tell you all about the fantastic stuff we're going to do and are doing with LCR Connect, Merseytidal, Glass Futures, London Style Transport System that others will talk about. But we really do have an advantage. You know, we are the UK's infectious disease hub, and the Pandemic Institute is set up here as well. So there are things right at the top of the scale that we want to do, but also we're attracting companies in who have signed up who only have, you know, 2, 3, 4, 10 employees, and that's the right way to do it. It should be everybody who can see the huge benefits of signing up to the Liverpool City Region Fair Employment Charter.
Steve, thank you so much. You've really whetted our appetite for what's happening in your area. Thank you. And last but not least, Karen, can I go to you and you tell us a little bit about the work in Newcastle and North Tyne? Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. I feel like a bit of a fraud following on from my esteemed colleagues there. So like you said before, I'm Deputy Leader of Newcastle City Council, but I'm here as a North of Tyne Combined Authority Cabinet Member on behalf of our Mayor, Jamie Driscoll. Although I'm obviously very happy to talk about the work we're doing in Newcastle also. North of Tyne is a small combined authority, as I'm sure people know, covering only 3 local authorities, and it's a relatively young one. But I'm sure Jamie would want me to emphasise just how much we've achieved in a relatively short space of time. We launched our North of Tyne Good Work Pledge in November 2020, and so far we've got 104 businesses, I think it was last week, accredited to this scheme, which is generally growing by about 2 or 3 accreditations a week, and it's covering over 46,000 employees so far. To be awarded the Good Work Pledge, organisations have to demonstrate how they meet our 5 pillars of good practice. And for anyone who's on the call who's not familiar with the Good Work Pledges, for us, they are valuing and rewarding their workforce by paying a fair and decent wage, valuing and promoting job security, job fulfilment amongst their workers, promoting health and well-being, effective communications and representation by, amongst other things, valuing and listening to employees, developing a balanced workforce by investing in training and development, providing apprenticeships, having a clear vision, values, strategies and policies and processes that promote inclusivity, equality, diversity. And the final pillar is social responsibility, which I think Steve was just talking about before there. Of course, we also need to grow our local economy, providing more jobs and supporting new businesses to establish themselves and existing businesses to thrive. And Jamie wouldn't forgive me if I didn't mention that in the North of Tyne area, we've exceeded our jobs target. We're the #1 area for investment, for inward investment. And as he never tires of telling people, we've made 14 years worth of progress in 3.5 years. Central to our inclusive economy is our investment in skills and adult education. We recognise that our region requires a skills infrastructure that's fully aware of and responsive to the sectors that have labour and skill shortages. And it also needs to take into consideration our planned economic growth, both for now and in the future. And to achieve an economy that works for all, we're focusing on engaging and upskilling our residents, including those furthest from the labour market, by providing specialist and intensive support to overcome often multiple and complex barriers to employment. We've got a North of Tyne's Funding for Skills, which provides the opportunity to join up the region's skills and training offer, reduce duplication and make sure we're reaching those communities who are most disadvantaged. And we've got a Skills for Growth programme, which focuses on digital innovation, green growth, culture, and the creative and tourism sector. And complementing the work of the Combined Authority, Newcastle City Council launched the city's first inclusive economy strategy last month in conjunction with our first anti-poverty strategy. We introduced the Newcastle Living Wage back in 2012 for our lowest paid employees. But last November, we achieved what has long been one of my ambitions, which was to achieve the Living Wage accreditation from the Living Wage Foundation as part of our commitment to fair pay and a decent wage. And our next ambition is to work with others to become a living wage city. Fundamental to this is our belief that an inclusive economy can only be built on strong foundations of good health and well-being, and an economy that is truly inclusive will deliver improved health and well-being outcomes for all of our residents. Health and social inequalities blight the lives of all of those who suffer them, and they constrain everyone's capacity to obtain and retain work. Not only is employment important due to the established relationship between poverty and ill health, but work in its good work in itself is good for people's health. Work and health are central to the story of people and place. And one of the ways we're addressing this is through the Better Health at Work Award. It's the largest workplace health and wellbeing programme in England. It's established in 2009, and there are now over 60 Newcastle-based businesses taking part in the award from all sectors, and over 400 regional employers have signed up. And finally, Newcastle City Council's Economic Development team have started work on the development of a good employer network, which will build momentum around the Good Work Pledge, around the Living Wage Network, and other efforts designed to improve the working conditions of Newcastle's residents and to help those furthest from employment get closer to good and sustainable work. However, and my final point, I suppose, is that the core economy of family and community is absolutely fundamental to all of this. It underpins the market and our natural economy by raising children, caring for people who are frail, ill or disabled, and building a civil society. The core economy needs a stable foundation to thrive, and that includes warm and safe homes, secure, good incomes, support for childcare and other caring responsibilities, and accessible and affordable transport and community connections. And all of this hardwires inclusion into our economy from the very start. And hopefully we will see more of that in our new devolution deal as and when it's agreed.
Karen, thank you so much. Goodness, we've heard a lot, haven't we, over the last few minutes? I mean, I applaud the work going across all of those areas. Absolutely so stimulating and inspiring to hear about those different approaches, but with some common themes. I mean, I heard a lot about that sort of using charters to kind of address the social and economic issues. We've heard about growth, inclusivity, skills, health and well-being. And I'm sure there's lots of thoughts kind of racing through people's minds on the webinar today. So brilliant that we've now got the opportunity for some Q&A time with our guests, and Peter and myself will be asking the questions. So I wonder if I could start first of all, and Andy, you introduced this notion of having kind of some teeth around the charter. And I'm just interested about how your thinking has progressed over the last few months, from maybe some of the soft levers around encouraging a focus on good work and strong people leadership, to kind of moving towards what you talked about as that kind of having teeth for the charter. Could you just tell us a little bit more about why you feel it's necessary to move in that direction?
Yes, thanks, Susan. It's really something Tracy said, you know, a statement from us as a city region about what we consider to be right, fair and proper, and that's that people should be in jobs that are secure, that pay them enough to live on, and obviously are good for their mental health and their well-being, that they're kind of fair in terms of pay gaps across different characteristics. It's, you know, that's what we should say as a city region. So the way we then go out to procure services should reflect those values. And I think it is, you know, again, what Tracy was saying about not thinking that we're the north of England, therefore we have to accept some form of employment that is, oh, well, just it's the best we can get, and therefore we'll just take it. It is about having that confidence to say, you know what, if you want to come here, this is the way we are and the way we think and the way we look after people. And so actually we want partners who are prepared to do the same, rather than come here and, you know, make easy money and do that by actually damaging the fabric of our society. And I think we do have to come back to that pandemic situation. You know, it revealed, when the tide went out in March 2020, it revealed stuff that, you know, we kind of sensed was there, but we really saw it, didn't we, in terms of the very poor standards of some workplaces. Now, I know it's a journey and I know everyone can't get there straight away, but I just think, you know, we should be demanding about it. We should use all the levers that we've got. And actually the social value framework that Steve mentioned has probably been underused. You know, it's been around for a decade or more, and I don't think we've really fully exploited its potential to kind of, you know, reverse the race to the bottom and start it moving in the other direction. You know, that you build and lift people up from that direction. So, as I say, you know, I think social value kind of struggles sometimes because people say, well, what is it? How do we define it? How do we measure it? The charter, you know, the Fair Work Charter in Liverpool or Leeds, or the Good Employment Charter in Greater Manchester, gives you a very specific and tangible way of demonstrating social value, and actually therefore makes it easy for companies to demonstrate social value. And I think that's, in our case anyway, that we think that's worked. You know, I don't think people did expect us to link the charter to the bus franchising process, but I think it's kind of sent a very clear message around the bus industry as to what type of public transport system that we want. One that's not just good for passengers, but that's good as well for the people who work on it and drive those trams and buses around. So that's the way we see it, Susan. And I just think, you know, if you think about it, if you think of the might of public procurement across the north of England, if you imagine a world where it was all weighted for 20% social value, and there were charters in place across all of the geographies of the north, and we all were pulling in that same direction, I think the next pandemic, God forbid, but when it comes, because it will come, hopefully the story of the north of England in that moment will be different than it was in 2020.
Thank you, Andy. Thanks for kicking us off there. Do any of our other mayors or Karen want to chip in on that use of those levers around procurement and social value? I know, Steve, you mentioned stick and carrot, you know, these kind of different ways of trying to progress fair work. Anything else you want to throw in on that question?
Yeah, thanks, Susan. And the reason that I'm saying stick and carrot is because there are good employers out there, you know. I mean, all you need is to point them in the right direction and they do the right thing. But for those that don't see the immediate benefits of signing up to something like a fair employment charter, we've got other levers at our disposal. And the main one of them being that we are a huge funder of lots and lots of things that happen. And for those people who want to continue to receive funding from us, that we're saying that we'll start looking at the likes of social value weightings in the procurement process. Now, it's not the only factor, and as you know, you can't just do it on who comes out best for social value. It has to be a whole series of different procurement criteria that you have to guide and watch and assess on. But if, as Andy just said, you're starting to develop a culture where people understand that if they want to work collaboratively with the combined authority, then that's just as powerful. So we're doing as much as we can within the legalities and the immediacy of what we're doing, but we're also trying to change the long-term culture of the way businesses work in the city region.
Brilliant, thank you. And I guess that long-term culture change, there's several things that contribute to that. Thank you. I'll hand over to Peter to ask a question in a moment, but just before I do, while I've got the floor, Tracy, you mentioned small firms a couple of times in your introduction, and I'm just interested about whether you've got any particular thoughts about how we engage those smaller businesses in good work, because it sometimes feels like it's something it's easier for the bigger organisations with big HR teams and so on to address, particularly around people leadership and good line management skills. So what's your way of engaging small businesses?
I mean, Susan, you're absolutely right. That's why it's taken us so long. I mean, the launch in Bradford, I think, was like 18 months ago, and it feels like another decade. But the point for us there is no point just making a Fair Work Charter that actually doesn't have any impact. But our challenge was those SMEs, because your point is right. We have big companies here. We've got Channel 4, Sky Bet, you know, loads of government organizations. They will be already doing the right thing. And it's easy for them to sign up, and they pat themselves on the shoulder and they say, we've done the right thing. But I think what is unique about Mayoralties is we can be, to Steve's point about the carrot, we can create an environment to help you. So SMEs, for example, they say to me, you know, times are really hard. We're just keeping going. The idea of being able to invest in learning and development, I don't think we can do it. So we can, as mayors, with widening powers over skills and training, step in on, you know, support for learning and development. So I've been able to widen the eligibility for free training, not just for those on the minimum wage, but those on the real living wage. And that's given us 2,000 more learners coming potentially into a point where they're employable. So we can be part of the whole ecosystem to support businesses to do the right thing. But we have to have that carrot, because smaller businesses are saying, well, you know, what with Brexit and the new rules and regulations and COVID, cost of living crisis, wage inflation, how on earth are we going to do everything else around it? And we are here as colleagues to help. And that's why the Trailblazer deal that Andy in Greater Manchester and Andy in West Mids, that additionality is going to really help us support businesses, because we can be light on our feet, like boot camps, short training programs, bespoke to companies and sectors, manufacturing or digital in our regions, to help those smaller businesses to then sign up to the Fair Work Charter, because they know that learning and development is happening off-site maybe and delivered maybe by the mayor, but they can then work with us to deliver it. So it is a real challenge, but that's why it's taken us so long. But I really hope that this attention to the detail and working with FSB and others to understand what small businesses need, I'm really hoping we're going to get, you know, a really good sign up that will make a difference and put more money in people's pockets. And that is the point of it, isn't it? Greater fulfillment, better well-being, you know, opportunities for growth and development in an organization, and more money in your pocket, so we have that inclusive growth.
Brilliant, thank you, Tracy. There's some really nice practical thoughts there, and I think that's a great example of that sort of tailoring the design of the charter to your area and your business needs in that patch. Peter, I could talk all day with these guests, but let me hand over to you for some questions as well.
Yeah, thank you very much, Susan. And I see Steve's just had to move on. I know the world of politics never stops, and lots of issues to deal with, but already been a very rich conversation. Just to echo your sort of summary thoughts, Susan, it's so good to hear you all talk about the importance of this, about driving the economy, about social change as well, but also acknowledging that this is a hard thing to get across a very wide and very diverse economy in each of your regions. And Tracy, you touched on some of the challenges around SMEs. So I just wanted to talk perhaps a bit more about that. So we've got to a certain point. What more do we, or what are the vehicles and mechanisms that you're all using to most promote these ideas? Because I think also, as you said, Tracy, sometimes people hear these things, particularly smaller businesses, and say, you know, I got all this regulatory stuff to deal with, I got all these other challenges, now you want me to do this as well? And not seeing, as you've all very clearly articulated, actually, that no, but by doing these things, you help to create a more productive workforce, you help to engage people and connect people and bring people in. But I just wanted to say, to open up the thought with you all about what are the channels and the ways that you're promoting your charters, and what do you think is working best? And maybe start with you, Andy, because you probably had the program running as long as anybody.
Yes, it's a good question, Peter. On a very simple level, I always attend the presentation events that we have where people get their plaque, because they get a plaque to put up and a certificate. Yeah. And that's a good opportunity just to individually name them and praise them. Because I think Steve said it before he left. You know, there's loads of good employers out there. So how do they get recognition? And I think getting recognition from your own home city region means something actually to people. Probably, if you don't mind me saying, to ACAS and CIPD, perhaps even more than maybe recognition from organisations like yours. You know, when you've got recognition from the place where you're based and your employees live and work, it's a source of pride, isn't it, to be named as a Greater Manchester Good Employer. And we, you know, obviously want to keep building that celebratory culture. So Ian, who leads on our charter, leads our unit for us, has established a podcast where we kind of network people and allow people to talk about the good things that they're doing. We have a Good Employment Awards night coming up in a couple of months, where I think you were there last year, Susan. I think you might remember that. So we're doing all these things. I think the bit where we could go further, to answer your question, Peter, is actually more relentlessly promote the members as businesses that people should buy from. So I often use this example, but Dunster's Farm, for instance, are one of our accredited Greater Manchester Good Employers. So, you know, I think we should say, if you're buying cottage cheese in the supermarket, why not pick up Dunster's Farm instead of, I don't know, I'll get into product placement here if I'm not careful, but why not do that? Because they're a good employer, based here, support them. And I think that building that culture of actually saying to people, support these companies, and you know, and getting their names out and getting it wider known that they're a good employer is definitely, I think, something we could do more of and do better. So I think just to say lastly, I take the point about small businesses, but actually I think personally, I think the smaller you are, the more likely you are to be a good employer, actually, because you have to really know your staff, look after your staff, you know, you rely on them so much. So I know there is an issue, but I'm not saying it's always the case, but I think it can often be the case that they're good employers. I think supporting them through the process, you know, I think is a part of it, because they probably wouldn't feel they've got time to do it. And I think that it's the kind of time side of it, maybe, that not so much are they a good employer or are they not. But I do think with yourself and with ACAS, we need to perhaps do more on the business case for good employment, i.e. it isn't just good for society, although it is very good for society. It is good for the economy, but actually it's good for you as an individual player within that economy. You will have a more motivated workforce, higher morale, higher productivity, less sickness. You'll be spending less on recruitment. I just feel we need to kind of work more to nail that business case for good employment, because it's there. It absolutely is there. And I know there's been some work on it. But if we really simplify it for those smaller businesses, why should you join this network, this movement of employers that are working together to improve employment? Because if you strip everything else away, your business will do better. Yeah. And it's, you know, it's kind of nailing that, really, that I think is what we've got to do.
Yeah, I think lots of really good points there, Andy. Absolutely. And I know Susan would agree. We're both very passionate on the evidence idea as well. And you're right, we can do more to promote that, learning from all of you, but also that this is a bigger collective national and indeed international agenda as well. I mean, a lot of countries talking much more about these ideas of good work and greater transparency, measuring the right things so that you can evidence it, both to make the case, but also, of course, to reassure ourselves that somebody signed up to the charter and they are actually continuing to do these things as well. But that idea of community and connection and recognition and reward, Karen, I know you're a little bit earlier on some of these programs, and maybe there's some good ideas you're scribbling down there from Andy, but anything else you would add to in terms of how you promote this and bring people along with us on the journey?
A lot of what Andy has just said is, yeah, you're right, I was making notes, but also some of it resonates because it's clearly similar to the work we're carrying out. Some of what we're hoping our next stage will be, we want to build a network of accredited employers. We want to do that, you know, that whole publicity Andy's just talked about, but we're also in the early stages of developing a member-only resource, so that would help continuous improvement. learning and development around those five pillars that I mentioned before, and also developing a mentoring scheme so that we can help whether it's between large and small businesses or between businesses of similar sizes, just to help through their learning and to help share some of their knowledge and their experience and their networking as kind of a bonus. It goes back to that carrot, I suppose. And what we've also talked about doing is introducing another. We have two levels. So we have you're kind of working towards and good the Good Work Pledge. So we're talking about introducing a learning level for those smaller micro employers, and for those businesses that are just starting out, to help them embed those good practices right from the very beginning. And then the other thing I think for us really is about making sure that we have those connections with all of the professional bodies like yourselves, so to make sure that everybody is aware of what we're doing, that it's here, what it is, and actually some of those very simple things that you can do that make a huge difference, that would also gain you this award. So again, going back to that whole issue around social value, a lot of our small businesses already meet so much of that criteria because they buy from other small local businesses. Their supply chain is already local. So there's all of those added factors, I think, that we need to highlight to people. It's actually much simpler than you think it is. You're doing so much of this already. There might be one or two things you might need to change or adopt or adapt, and we'll help you to do that. And we need to get that message out there. We need to be better at doing that.
Yeah, and lots of great thoughts there, Karen. As you said, it's emphasising that not all of this is big or complex or expensive, whatever. It's doing the right things. But you both emphasise, and I'm sure Tracy, just to come to you, you'd probably talk about similar ideas: the strength of community, learning from each other, and we can support those sorts of things as well, sharing of knowledge. But we have seen more and more as we are in very uncertain and very challenging times, the power of bringing people together to share and learn from each other, and I think that is a very powerful idea. And then the mentoring thing that you mentioned, Karen, absolutely, having bigger businesses mentoring and supporting small businesses. I think these have been models in other countries like Germany. They talk a lot about the Mittelstand model. We need more of that across our economy, and I think it's great to hear you talk about those things. But Tracy, anything you'd add in terms of promoting and supporting?
Well, firstly, Karen, you said at the beginning of your comments that you're an imposter, but you're absolutely not. I mean, you're smashing it. So I'm in awe of what you're doing. So congratulations to you and to Jamie. I think we can't underestimate the power, obviously, of our voice, and also knowledge for the consumer. So if I have a choice between Pret and Greggs, I'll go to Greggs because they are unionized. But, I know that, so it's really important for us to get the message out there. But to Andy's point, and Steve has a similar position, is in a similar position, that we have enormous opportunities for investment, investable propositions. So here in West Yorkshire, mass transit is going to be a 10-year, 15-year project with high-end jobs. We can actually be very persuasive and influential in that space. And I think one example of the influence of somebody taking the lead in this space, the bus companies were saying the reason why buses were disappearing, ghost buses, was they didn't have enough drivers. Collectively, we got a unique group together of all the operators and myself to campaign for 1,000 bus drivers. I was able to say, I want more women bus drivers, therefore you're going to have to recruit to part-time. And now we have bus companies recruiting to part-time for the first time ever in West Yorkshire. So just to say that the power of the Metro Mayor's voice in the region should not be underestimated. And it is fantastic that we are all in a common space, that there's no comparison, there's nobody that could divide us and say, well, in Manchester it's different, because collectively we are supporting the workforce to have the most enriched workforce in learning and development and well-being and loyalty and all of that, but to make sure more money goes in people's pockets and they have access to those great jobs and to training. So I've learned a lot, and I love the idea of the podcast. I'm going to steal that. Thank you, Andy. I'm learning every day from Manchester.
I'm just relieved that the Mayor of West Yorkshire chose Greggs over Pret, because if it had been the other way around, it could have been serious fallout from that.
Well, I passed the test, the Greggs test.
Yeah, massively passed the test.
But I think devolution, and there is an arms race, isn't there, between the Conservative Party and the Labour Party at the moment about who can devolve more at speed. I do think if we make sure that whatever political stripe of mayors, that every mayor would understand, and I'm sure Andy Street is doing this in West Mids, that you get more money in people's pockets, your economy grows. So I think mayors can really lead the agenda in this space.
I'll just say quickly, Peter, to follow on Tracy's, I do need to leave after this. Tracy's enthusiasm and positivity kind of shines through, and I think it's something we all feel at the moment. You know, English devolution to the city regions and hopefully beyond is working. It is working. It's bringing an energy to places that, you know, they've long needed, and it's actually, I would say, the most functional part of British governance, in that it's place-based, it's inclusive, it's unifying, and the more we do it, the more benefits that we will get from it. And I just wanted to finish by just picking up what Tracy said before about job growth. Something is definitely happening now in the north, and we would say this certainly in Manchester. I think people have reassessed with regard to where they base people. I hear it from my son who lives in London, where he says 20 and 30 somethings are saying, why would I live at the end of the Piccadilly line when I could live in city centre Leeds, city centre Liverpool, or city centre Manchester and have a different life and a quality of life? And so I think good jobs are migrating north, actually, is the feeling that I've got at the moment. You know, these great cities have got so much to offer. And, you know, brilliant to hear what Newcastle are doing. And obviously, I think when the gaps are filled in and the whole of the north is kind of pushing this agenda together, honestly, I think then we'll start to sort of see what people have long wanted to see, which is just a kind of emergence of a very different sort of political culture across all of our areas, where we're not kind of pleading for things anymore. There's just positivity building because of what's happening. So yeah, I just wanted to pick that up, because I thought Tracy was putting it really well there. I'm Greggs over Pret, Tracy, so I think we're all in that camp. So no, it's been a great conversation, and I think really positive. Let's keep building this as a movement. The good employment agenda, or the fair work agenda, whichever we call it, it needs to be a movement of people who join and who feel part of then a sort of growing sort of drive. And as I said at the start, you've both been huge supporters of that, CIPD and ACAS, and we're really grateful to you.
Yeah, no, thanks, Andy. That's a good place to draw it to close, because I know you guys have got to all move on. We'll spend a few minutes just chatting after you've gone, but really powerful messages. Absolutely. I think, as you said, Tracy, hopefully devolution really is here to stay. Place is a really important dimension of all of this, but you are leading on a very, very important agenda, and we absolutely want to support you and back you. I think the only other thing is, you know, what needs to happen at national government as well. I mean, there's more investment in skills we need everywhere. There are a lot of other things we have to address to create that context in which we can all be successful and effective. But thanks to all of you again for joining. Thanks for all your leadership on this subject, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you.
So I think we're going to hand over to Terry and have just a few minutes conversation between ourselves, and then we'll let people go.
Thank you, Peter. Yes, I mean, I was just reflecting on some of the contributions, and it has been really stimulating. And I think one of the things about people coming together is that ability to kind of, like say, learn from each other. And it's wonderful to see the numbers that have come here today. And I probably just want to finish off this last session just by maybe drawing some of those threads together and just getting some reflections from yourself, Peter and Susan, on what we've heard, because I think what we're hearing is good work is not just good for the workplaces that people work in, but it's much wider than that. It's about those societies, those communities we live in, and can have so much kind of, like, say, benefit. But of course, it has to be built, it has to be maintained. And one of the things that Daphne and I, when we did the joint campaign with the Greater Manchester Charter all that time ago, Daphne, it seems such a long time ago now in the midst of the pandemic, was we looked at, can I say, the characteristics that we might want to promote. And one of the ones that we chose was the concept of people management, you know, and people talk about it as this golden thread. And I'm just interested in, kind of say, what your reflections are about, can I say, that role that people management can play in good workplaces and good work. And if I could come to you first, Peter, just for any reflections on that.
Yeah, no, thanks, Terry. I mean, first of all, it was really good to hear the consistency of the message and the conviction behind this good work agenda. But as you said, on the people management thing, I mean, it's been a soapbox of mine for a very long time, that if we're honest, we have not invested enough in the people skills of our line managers. People tend to get promoted because they tick the right boxes technically and so on, but then put into these roles, and particularly now where we are trying to really create inclusive workforces. We're trying to trust and empower our employees more. We're trying to deal with things like flexible working and different ways of working. My goodness, there's a very big imperative there for how we develop and train and support and recognize good people management in our organizations, because we all know, whether you're looking at it through an HR lens or any other, if you're not empowering and developing that kind of capability across your organization, these things are very, very difficult to sustain. And we also know that in reality, although I don't disagree with what Andy said about there are many, many small businesses that do stuff well, equally we know it's not a big business, small business thing necessarily. Sometimes people do things because they don't understand what they should be doing. And it's not because they're bad people, but they need that support. And our own work as a CIPD over a number of years in terms of small business support has shown that a lot of the things that they need to understand about work, and I'm sure, Susan, you would reflect this from an ACAS perspective, it's not big, clever, complex HR theory. It's fairly basic practice stuff. And it was good to hear there for all the combined authority mayors, the metro mayors, emphasize the fact that a lot of what we're talking about is not big complex stuff. It's some good principles which you then embed through your organization, and one of the most important levers to embed that is how you train and recognize and support your people managers and line managers at every level.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think definitely I would both say, from our working with the colleagues, say the charters across the north, this isn't theoretical. It is about real practical, can I say, effects on people's day-to-day working experience. Many of the metro mayors talked about, my things about voice, that ability to be able to contribute to your workplace and be heard can be incredibly enabling, not just for the individual, but for that workplace too, Susan, any thoughts on that people management piece from yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I'd absolutely echo the points that Peter's made, but I think just a couple of examples maybe of where practically people skills, those line management skills, have a real impact. If I think about the conversations I'm having with businesses right now and hearing people say, labour supply, for example, is, the biggest issue for a lot of organisations right now, along with, the cost of energy and so on. We know that line managers are massively important in shaping people's experiences day to day at work. And there's that old expression, isn't there, that it's often a poor line manager that makes you want to leave an organization. So, really investing in your managers so that they're great, not only at recruiting people, but retaining people as well. We know that flexibility is something that matters to job seekers nowadays, enormously so. I mean, ACAS did a poll recently and found that flexible working was one of the top reasons why people stay in their job.
Yeah.
If you've got good arrangements, flexibility, you're able to balance work and your kind of home life effectively. And again, it's often line managers who make those initial kind of judgments or engage people on topics like flexibility. So even, and I think this is an interesting point in that kind of big company scenario. You might have brilliant policies around flexible working, but if line managers aren't attuned to the needs of employees or supportive in kind of being flexible in ways of working, then people are more inclined to leave a company. So, you know, I think they do play a strong role. Health and well-being is another area. You know, as businesses now, I would challenge any business, to be honest, that says it doesn't have an issue with health and well-being, because it's, you know, mental health in particular is often the biggest cause of absence amongst employees in most workplaces now. So having line managers, again, really attuned to being able to have those early conversations to spot issues and help employees kind of work through to good well-being matters, and inclusivity as well. All of our Metro mayors and councillors mentioned inclusivity. It's a difficult area sometimes in businesses to navigate through what that means on a day-to-day basis. So again, investing in really practical support for line managers. It's a tough gig being a line manager in business nowadays, I think, because there's a lot of demands and pressures. So, you know, let's help our line managers be able to do the job as well as they can do.
Yeah, really good points there. Yeah, and there is a lot that goes into that line manager role, and I think probably during the pandemic we saw perhaps, may I say, even an expansion of that. You know, that pastoral kind of say demands on the, you know, on the line manager, and perhaps what they had to learn about kind of say the individual and their domestic and home circumstances.
Yeah.
But just turning to kind of say, we've had a wonderful event here today. You know, both our organisations committed, you know, to bringing together, you know, a conversation around good employment. Peter, how do you see things going forward in terms of, you know, the expansion of good work charters and fair work charters, and you know, what your organisation might want to do to support and maintain those movements?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really important question, Terry. I think we are seeing momentum, but it is about scaling up as well. I mean, you know, when we're talking about a few hundred organizations in economies which have got thousands or millions actually of businesses, then there's a question about scaling up, which is why I was interested to ask them in terms of how you best promote. So I think we've got absolutely some very strong foundations. I think, you know, you've got as I think Steve said, the carrot and stick idea of public procurement, which is happening at national level as well as local government levels, much more focused on things like, okay, we're a big procurer as a public sector, so we want to make sure we're using that channel to influence some of these practices. But I think also on the very much the sort of positive side of all of this is that this is an agenda which has grown more and more in recent years, as I briefly touched on in some of my remarks. And we both together as ACAS and CIPD are very committed to working on things like the so-called ESG agenda, so environmental, social, and governance, because so many more stakeholders of businesses are demanding and expecting to see a lot more of the things that we've described. Now, those stakeholders, of course, include your current employees, they include your prospective employees, but they are also increasingly including investors and indeed customers and suppliers. I mean, they all mentioned the idea that maybe if we could badge some of this stuff better, we can encourage customers to go to organizations that reflect these good practices, and that becomes a point of influence. But I think it's really interesting to see, you know, let's pick on things like the investor community for the private sector, increasingly asking these questions. They're saying, what are you doing to invest in your workforce for the future? What are you doing to create inclusive workplaces? What are you doing that helps recognize and support the well-being of your people? Because we know, as has been emphasized throughout this webinar, just how important those things are to the attraction and retention of your workforce, to addressing the skills gaps that that we all have, and to driving things like productivity and indeed innovation as well. And these are critical business agendas, therefore, as well as social agendas. So I'm very positive about it. I think there's very strong signals coming from all sorts of sources, as I said, regulators, investors, and so on, as well as these initiatives around good work and fair work charters, which have been so taken up, particularly, I think, across the northern region, as we've seen. I was also in Scotland last week. The Fair Work Convention there has had a lot of traction in Scotland. So I think it's for all of us now to support these ideas, promote them further, use these frameworks like the good and fair work charters to drive this practice. But as I said, I think that influence is coming from a lot of other sources now, which we all need to encourage.
Thanks, Peter. And Susan, how would you see ACAS's position in this going forward?
Yeah, I think probably three things spring to mind, Terry. I think that practical help for business, definitely we will keep providing support where we can do and supporting the charters as they develop as well. And if there are areas where the charters particularly want more focus, we're really happy to work with partners on kind of shedding a bit more light on the how to practical side of improving, you know, people leadership or whatever else it might be. It struck me in particular when the mayors were talking about needing to kind of publicise the business case as well for good work. I think that's something maybe we could do some more work on, because there is evidence out there, and it's good, strong, compelling evidence that there's a real business benefit, an economic benefit to good work. But it sometimes takes a bit of penetrating the research to find that. So maybe there's something we could do with other organisations, Peter included, to really try and get that out in clear, simple messages, and also creating forums like this so that people can share good practice. It can feel a bit of a lonely road, I think, sometimes as an organisation or a single charter, whereas when you hear about the good practice and you kind of see your work and you get support from other people, I think that's really powerful. So let's keep bringing people together in these sorts of environments to share good practice, keeping it simple so that we don't have to reinvent wheels as well, because there's some brilliant best practice out there now that we can all learn from.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think part of what we're seeing in the charter movements themselves is where there are barriers and challenges. You know, we can get almost ambassador kind of say sectors and ambassador companies that can turn around and say, yeah, we faced up to that issue and share that practice about how they overcome it. So that's really, really good. Now we're coming to the end now, and I just want to kind of say ask you for one quick fire. Kind of say maybe one thing you would say to any organisation that was looking at kind of say good work or fair work charters. Why should it matter to them? Peter, if I can come to you first, what would you just single it up as one benefit perhaps that you could say to them?
Yeah, I think it's what we've touched on. Why they should sign up is because it gives them a framework to develop their organisation in a way that is good for their people, good for their business, and good for the society and communities of which we are part. And those are very, very powerful reasons. But as we all said, yes, and I think it was a very good call by Andy to say, yeah, let's work together to build the evidence that sustains those ideas. But I think that's the essence of the message, isn't it?
Thanks, Peter. And Susan, anything you'd add?
Yeah, I think people want to join businesses where they feel there's a good, strong kind of soul of the organisation, as well as just, you know, an interesting job. And I think it really does help attract and retain staff if they know that this matters to their employer.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for your contributions and for chairing a stimulating debate with kind of say the Metro Mayors and kind of say Councillor Kilgour. I'm going to just wrap up now for everybody, because we are coming to the end, and we don't want, you know, like Peter mentioned about this not being the end of you know, a journey. This is an ongoing movement that we want people to, you know, to sign up to. You know, you may need to go at your own pace, and we want to be there as ACAS and CIPD to help you along that journey. So we've already penciled in a date for the 10th of October, where we're going to put on another event. So you can look out for that, and we'll send out placeholders to you about that. Daphne had mentioned earlier about the soft skills in hard times paper. We will send out what we produced during the pandemic, as you know, looking at that golden thread of people management, and we are currently working together on updating that, and so we will be sharing that too. So I mean, thank you for coming along. We know a lunchtime session can be a little bit tricky for everybody, but we hope it's been something that you've enjoyed. We will be sending you an evaluation sheet, so hopefully you can give some feedback about what the format was like, the timings, those kind of things. And we will also have a recording of the session that we'll send out to people so that you can reflect on it. So I'll close now, just as the sun in Liverpool is starting to shine all over me. So God is shining his light on me. The weather across the north looks really, really good. But thank you so much, you know, for taking the time to join us today. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.